Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, talking about how Tim Cook of Apple, who has obviously threatened to shut down Twitter from the App Store, which would be a huge blow to Twitter's business. It wouldn't be the end of it, but it would be a massive problem for them. That same company, Apple, is fine doing all kinds of business in China and fine making sure that the Chinese can even do their suppression of protests. I mean, here is Governor DeSantis saying that Apple is using their authority to protect the CCP while, in fact, making it harder for us to enjoy any First Amendment rights here. Play 16.
If you look what's going on in China now, the CCP, they have been imposing these zero COVID lockdown policies. They've been doing it on and off for 3 years. And you have people in China that are really engaged in a noble effort to protest, which is basically Leninist rule. So what is Apple doing with that? They are limiting the airdrop function of the protesters. So they are serving basically as a vassal to the Chinese Communist Party. Then, on the other hand, here in the United States, what are they doing? They are trying to get Elon Musk's Twitter off the App Store potentially, which would be a huge blow for free speech. And so this is maybe the most powerful company in the entire world, certainly one of the most powerful companies in American history. They exercise more authority in some respects than even some governments do, and they're using their authority to protect the CCP, will also try to limit speech here in the United States.
I would say that there's a couple things here. One, Clay, is the profit motive, obviously, of operating in China. And also, Apple believes that nothing will happen to it for this hypocrisy. I think a lot of these big companies think they are effectively untouchable.
Yeah, there's an untenable nature to woke corporatism, if you want to describe it, because they pretend that they are woke in the United States while bending the knee to China overseas. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. The World Cup is a perfect example of this. All of those big brands are in the Middle East, in a country where gay people can be beheaded, literally beheaded all over the Middle East for being gay. As you pointed out, Buck, Iran said we don't have a problem with gay issues because no one in the entire country is gay. That's certainly not true. But none of those companies speak out in the Middle East. They don't use rainbow slogans. They only do that here. It's incredibly hypocritical. CNN, New York Times report just dropped in the last few minutes, in the process of cutting $100 million worth of employees. That's going to be going on today and tomorrow. That's a lot of people when you consider that while the Don Lemons of the world and the Anderson Coopers of the world may be making $7, $8, $10 million, whatever the heck their crazy salaries are, they're not losing their jobs. But a lot of people making $70,000 or $80,000 behind the scenes are going to be getting cut. And we're talking about the big picture structural battle that's going on for free speech between Amazon and Twitter. I think it's worth considering what the overall media environment looks like right now. And it is, I think, going to be a real mess for many companies over the next couple of years. Apple, by and large, Buck, other than Ron DeSantis, we just played a clip, and other than an occasional politician, most of the time escapes criticism for its hypocrisy. The actual best version of ridicule for Apple and their CEO, Tim Cook, occurred at the 2020 Golden Globes. This was maybe the most blistering and hysterical and funny speaking truth to power example that we've seen in a very long time. If you have forgotten about it, here was Ricky Gervais going after Hollywood and after Apple and all the hypocrisy in LA.
Apple roared into the TV game with a morning show, a superb drama, a superb drama about the importance of dignity and doing the right thing, made by a company that runs sweatshops in China. So, well, you say you're woke, but the companies you work for, I mean, unbelievable. Apple, Amazon, Disney. If ISIS started a streaming service, you'd call your agent, wouldn't you? So, if you do win an award tonight, Don't use it as a platform to make a political speech, right? You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. You know nothing about the real world. Most of you spent less time in school than Greta Thunberg. So, if you win, right, come up, accept your little award, thank your agent and your God, and fuck off, okay?
And that was one of the best comedic performances that I can remember. Certainly the best at an award show that I could ever remember. And just in a more general sense, Ricky Gervais, because some of those actors were upset about it too. It was not, this was people, this is like initially when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, and I was like, whoa, he hit him pretty hard. And all these people, he didn't really hit him. Like, no, he really hit him. Like, that actually was a thing, and then everyone figured that out about within 24 hours. Ricky Gervais was going after them, and some of them really didn't like it because they're actually not used to people pointing out. I mean, what he said there is funny, but true, right? And you have all of these companies, I mean, that abide by these same woke, hypocritical. I mean, the principles are effectively hypocritical from the outset. I mean, the notion that, for example, right now, there's such a concern over safety on Twitter. What does that even mean? Clay, people have been posting death threats and horrible stuff on Twitter for as long as it has existed. And the mullahs and of Iran and the Taliban, and we've talked about this, they all get to keep their accounts. But Jordan Peterson didn't until Elon took over, right? I mean, there are others I can't even think of. The Babylon Bee wasn't allowed to have their account. I mean, it's absurd. But I do think that while there's the dynamic of the mega corporations, so that's Disney and it's Apple and go down the list, right? Facebook. I think that they believe that Amazon, got to throw Amazon in there, they are insulated from whatever wokeness that they engage in or their subsidiaries because they're so massive and so powerful. But also, they don't really care about what's happening in China. They care about what's happening in America, meaning they don't want political opposition here. When they used to say, oh, if you don't like Twitter, it's a private company, you can build your own. Well, when Ron DeSantis, for example, starts talking about monopoly issues and brings up Apple, you want to say to them, hey, it's a nice country we've got here. If you don't like it, you can go build your own, buddy. There are laws about monopolies. There are legal issues that come into play. And some of these companies realize that if the politics goes against them here, their power and their profits are actually at risk. Whereas, China, they don't care.
Yeah, and well, they actually fear the Chinese government, right? Apple, the reason why they won't say a word about China is they're afraid of what the Chinese government will do.
Well, they'll shut them out. I mean, they don't care about the abuses or whatever. They pretend to care.
Well, look, they care about appearing to be woke. That's why I think that Ricky Gervais statement is so perfect. If ISIS had a streaming service, you'd be calling your agents to try to get on, get the biggest paycheck you can. And that's where the inherent hypocrisy becomes very, very difficult to reconcile. Because you have, and I'll give you an example, Buck, from the world of sports up in New York. You have Joe Tsai, right, who is the owner of the Brooklyn Nets. And they have gone after Kyrie Irving for sharing a link to a video that is on Amazon about Hebrew black individuals, like whatever the content is. They didn't go after Amazon for hosting the video. They went after Kyrie Irving for tweeting a link to the video. And they made him apologize, and they said, you're anti-Semitic, and this is unacceptable. They didn't go after Amazon. They also didn't go after Joe Tsai, who has refused to ever condemn anything that's happened in China, because I believe he made all of his money off Alibaba, the big Chinese conglomerate. That's how he became a billionaire. So he's lecturing his employee, Kyrie Irving, saying you aren't allowed to say this, while simultaneously he's carrying water for the Chinese Communist Party and refusing to criticize anything that they do. And that's true for the NBA. That's true for Apple. That's true for Disney. They have one standard in America and another standard around the world, and they don't in any way stand for basic human rights. And
I'm also going to say this, and this because this applies to Republicans right now. I think everybody should keep this in mind, because there's this thing now of TikTok, like we're going to take on TikTok. TikTok, even yes, it is Chinese owned, although it's operated here in the States, and they say their servers are here. But then people say, well, the servers, the information can be transited to China, whatever. TikTok is much less of a threat to your free speech and to the integrity of elections than the social media platforms that operate based largely in Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah.
The ones that are a threat to us here are the ones that are here. And I think what you see with Republicans is a lot of them like to stand big and tall. Oh, look at what's going on in China, and look at what big tech in China and all this stuff. Yeah, that's worthwhile. It's worth talking about. But for Republican politicians, a lot easier. You can't get money from Alibaba. You can't get not legally. You can't get campaign donations legally from the Chinese Communist Party unless you're Joe Biden. So people look at this and they realize that American politicians get a lot of money. A lot of members of Congress get money from the Facebooks and the Amazons and the Googles and whatever. They're bought and paid for, folks. So I think everyone needs to be aware of look what's going on in China and TikTok is such a threat. I'm not saying it's not a threat. We talk about China, that's fine. But the real bravery is when you're saying you're going to take on companies that are here, right? So taking on a fight with Apple, for example, Apple's based here.
Yeah, I would argue that Apple and Google have become so big and so powerful that they are monopolies and that they should be investigated for significant antitrust violations. But you're right, because in particular, when everybody wants to talk about democracy and rigging and everything else, and I said this when it happened, when every big tech company simultaneously decided to suspend Donald Trump, Buck, he couldn't get on Pinterest. Pretend that he suddenly wanted to have, that Donald Trump got into knitting and he wanted to make mittens and sell them. He couldn't be on Pinterest.
They can deperson you from the internet, and they did it to a sitting president. Yes. I mean, that was the crossing of the Rubicon moment with big tech, and people had been warning about this. And of course, they start out with, the undesirables, right? They start out with the most provocative, flashpoint, lunatic, whatever people. They go after them in the early phases. Oh, it's about safety. And they took it all the way up to a president. I mean, They just basically depersoned Andrew Tate, which is part of why I think this guy's become so famous now. He was getting really famous. Then they depersoned him, and it's like, this guy's not allowed to be on the internet anymore? And all the companies decide together. It's like the dominoes fall. And if they can do that to people who are powerful and have reach, imagine the influence they have on imagine trying to make a case these days, Clay, that you have meaningful First Amendment rights if you can't use the internet. Oh, you're going to take out a printing press? Good luck with that one.
No, you're 100% right. And that's one reason that I ended up selling Outkick to Fox, because you have to have big enough advocates in order to make sure that your voice can be heard. Because I saw what happened. We had Donald Trump on my show, and we wrote articles about it. And suddenly you couldn't find us on Facebook. You couldn't find us on Twitter. Our traffic dropped 75, 80% almost overnight. A lot of people who have run media companies can tell you about that. And that's real dollars.